my class.
Let's roll.
We'll call the, you ready, Dan? I guess I should check with you, okay. We'll call the Planning, Environment, and Development Committee meeting for October 3rd, 2023 to order. We'll have a roll call. Joe.
Here.
Carolyn.
Here.
John.
Here.
Jim.
Here.
Oh, and I'm here. So we're all here except Lou at this time. We'll move on to the minutes approval for the September 5th committee meeting. Moved by Mr. Gademauer, seconded by Carl. Is there any discussion regarding the minutes from the September 5th meeting? Seeing no discussion, we'll go to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. We'll move on to public comment. We have one person signed up for public comment, and it's Kirk. Give him Donald, maybe? Go ahead, Kirk. You just want to state your name and the purpose of your comments?
Yeah, so my name is Kirk Donald, and I'm from Johnsburg, Illinois. But anyway, I'm just commenting on the request for $2.5 million of additional funds for the mental health board. I know that this is a planning committee. I was on my way here because I thought the comment for the mental health board was today, but Carl told me I could come and speak anyway, so here I am. I'll just read it. Hello, my name is Kirk Donald, and I'm here to comment on the requested $2.5 million for mental health services. If you read the U.S. News and World Report's Healthiest Communities 2022, you find that McHenry County is listed as one of the healthiest counties in the United States, ranked 216 out of 3,100 U.S. counties. In order to receive this accolade, one of the criteria reviewed is population health. McHenry County received its second highest rating in this category following public safety. If you review the housing category, you find working adults are spending 67.5 hours weekly to afford their homes in McHenry County. This is 27 hours over the national median. This is the main cause of mental stress in McHenry County. Property taxes are up, car insurance is up, homeowners insurance is up, gasoline taxes are up, school enrollment costs are up. Taxes in Illinois are tearing families apart. The taxes are unsustainable, so much so that U-Haul has listed Illinois as the #1 state for out-migration. This request for an additional $2.5 million isn't a one-time ask. It will more than likely remain in the budget year after year, causing additional stress. In my opinion, this request is an attempt to politicize this issue by orchestrating the demand that McHenry County add to inflationary woes by operating outside its means. When I was in school, I didn't ask the prettiest girl out. I asked the girl I knew I would be comfortable with. Sometimes you just have to know who you are. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments. Is anyone else?
Thank you.
Public to speak? We'll move on to members' comments. Any of the members have anything to say this morning?
I do.
Oh, Jim.
I just want to continue on with my opposition to the solar farm scenario that we have going on in the state. I've been accused of grandstanding by one of our members of our board in the meeting, and I think that's ridiculous and sick that they did that. And I will say, I believe, the state legislator and the governor have acted irresponsibly with our county here in McHenry County. We have done everything to support solar farm over the years. I believe we don't have the grid capacity for any of these solar farms, and they put it on hold for the last couple of years. I believe, or for the next couple of years, they put it on hold granting any hookups. I think that we ought to be putting on, as our county, a moratorium, even though the state statute says we can't, until they get these electrical grid set to hook everything up, because we've passed a whole lot of solar farms already that will never be put up because of the incapacity of our solar grid, and our electrical grid. So I believe we ought to consider accepting or discontinue accepting applications for solar farms at this point until they catch up with all the ones that we've already approved. So that's my comment, and call it grandstanding, whatever you call it. It's a belief of my constituents that are the ones who are really complaining, and I had a whole bunch of them last night complaining again about it. So.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Joe?
I would ask that 10.3 and 10.4 be switched in order on the agenda. I have to leave the room for 10.3, so.
Oh. Yeah, that's not a problem. Remind me when we get there if I forget.
No problem.
Okay. Any, morning, Lou. We were just at
Morning.
members' comments. Did you have anything for this morning?
Nothing. I apologize for being tardy.
Well, you'll get a little detention for that.
Thank you, Larry.
Okay, we're gonna move on to interviews. It's actually supposed to be at 8:40, so Mr. Goad is not here. I hate to move on, I don't wanna move on to something else without giving him a couple minutes to get here. Hey, hi Don. Don, come right up front here, please. I know we've met before, it's been a couple of years since we talked, but
Yes.
go ahead, introduce yourself and a little bit about why you would be interested in being on the Greenwood Drainage District Board.
I'm Don Goad. I've been on the Drainage District Board for the last 6 years. We created, I shouldn't say created, we've done a lot of projects, increased, the amount of maintenance we've done on the road, on the Drainage District in order to keep it very active. Because I don't know if you guys understand the Drainage District at all, but it actually lowers the level of a huge lake. That's what it does for that area, so they can use it for subdivisions, farming, so on and so forth. So my attempt now is to proceed and keep fixing the Drainage District. There's a lot more that needs to be done in order to, but money is a concern. We don't have a lot of money. The farmers have been very active with us, splitting costs and stuff in order to get this. We definitely need to increase our levies in order to maintain the current drainage district, and also to repair and we put a lot of new tile in. So that's all I can say. You got questions for me? We'd like to answer them.
Who else is on the Green?
Tim Watkins is the other one. We don't have a third one on board right now,
Okay.
so maybe it's not a coveted job. I don't know.
I'm sure it pays well.
Yeah.
Okay, any of the other committee members have any questions? I'm waiting for Jim because he's our stormwater guy here.
No, I'm very familiar with these guys, and they do a great job. And there's no reason not to support the drainage districts. We need to increase our drainage district and figure out a way to help them with additional funding if there's any way we could in a joint effort, especially at least along our roadways and everything, that our county roadways.
Joe?
Well, and I would say the other thing we should note is that also the Greenwood Drainage District drains this building. So if they go out of business, we have a water problem for ourselves.
Well, if I can give you one example of what we've accomplished lately is
Sure, please.
we replaced tile in a private area, which we have a right-of-way through. And with the farmers' help, it was underneath the building on 120. So we took it out from underneath there. The farmers paid half of it, so it was a $40-some thousand bill, they paid half, and the drainage district came up with the other half, so what I'm saying is that the farmers are willing to support this drainage system in order to make it work properly. We still have some more to do in Banford Park. We're trying to deal with the city of Woodstock right now that's kind of hitting some walls. The Merriman Park, they put all that in and didn't understand that there was a tile that ran through there, so they cut it off or destroyed it somehow. And so we have to get through them. They're claiming that that's their tile, so we have right of way through there. I don't know if you understand, but besides railroads, drainage districts are the next in line as far as power, which, it's not abused, but I'm just saying that, so these entities have to get on board with us to help us a little bit. So they take our tile, they put ponds in instead, and then, it drains the whole subdivision, takes the water from the roads, the rooftops and everything. So they have to be a partner, in helping us somehow. And that's some of the, roadblocks that we run into constantly.
You have the right to go on the property and fix a drain tile, but it's gotta be, you can't tunnel under a school. Is that,
Pardon me, Kim?
but you can't tunnel under a school, is that?
No, they are not supposed to put any structures over the top, or trees or anything else over the top of our tile. So years past, there was some confusion with the commissioners. They weren't out there to inspect at the time when some of these parks and stuff were put in. So, part of it's on the drainage district as far as not following through. So we're more active in that. Now they have to come to us, send us prints and everything else and what they're gonna do if they're gonna do something on top of our tile.
Good. Anybody else got anything for Don?
Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
In your application, you indicated that you were applying for the term that ends September 1st of 2025, but that's not actually your term. It's the open one of Leonard Schultz, and you're actually shorting yourself 1 year. Is that indeed what you wanted, or did you?
No, it was the other one. I thought, did I make a mistake there? Because it should have been the term that's my term.
That would be the 2026. I just wanted to clarify that for the committee.
Yep, great, thank you, Kathy. We have 2026 on our agenda, so we're correct here. Yellow?
So I'd like to make Brian Sager, member Sager and I just met with the two mayors of Wonder Lake and Greenwood to help begin to form a working partnership around something that's going on in Wonder Lake, and I want to extend that offer to you with Woodstock to see if we can help bring them to the table. And so just let me know, Don. My number is on the county website, and
Do you have a card by any chance?
you know what? Guess what? I do. Yeah, and so please feel free to give me a call.
Yeah, because right now we're attempting to go through our lawyer and stuff, and
Oh, sure.
that's not an avenue that we'd like to use.
I don't charge as much per hour as a lawyer, so. Here you go. Feel free to call.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks for coming in, Don. Thanks for applying for this position. We're gonna have a little deliberation. I have a feeling it's gonna be a short deliberation this morning.
Right. Do I just go or?
Yep, you can take off if you want, or you can stay. It's either way. Okay, we'll move on to 5.2, deliberation and selection for the Greenwood Drainage District. I've known Don for quite a while. He's a good guy and does a good job, so I don't have any issue myself. I don't know how well any of the rest of you know him.
Yeah, the points, he's just the right guy when we need. The problems that he's discussing right now is the reason we really need to focus on fixing our stormwater drainage issues. And he brings up a lot of good points, and he's definitely the man for the job for this district.
Yeah, he's real knowledgeable in that area.
Yeah.
Any other discussion?
We have a motion to approve it.
Sure.
Second.
I'll make that
Motion made by
motion.
Mr. Gallinaro, seconded by Carolyn. Any further discussion, or we'll go to vote? Okay, we'll vote. Jim?
Yes.
Lou?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. So Mr. Goad will move to the full board for approval or discussion. at the next board meeting, I'm sure. Number 6, presentation. We got some presentations down below or some project updates, but no presentations. Scott is not here anyway. We'll move to the routine consent agenda. Good. Does anyone want to remove anything from the routine consent agenda? Nobody wants to remove anything? Could I have a motion for the routine consent agenda to be approved? Moved by Lou, seconded by Carl. Any other discussion regarding the routine consent session? We'll go to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Routine consent agenda is approved. We'll move to discussion and directions. Amendments to the unified development.
Was any of those money,
No?
that solid waste? Okay.
I was looking at the same thing.
Yeah,
We good?
yeah, we're good.
Okay. Adam,
Hey.
amendments to the unified development ordinance related to
Right.
temporary entertainment events.
Yeah. Renee. Invite you to the table, that'd be phenomenal. All right. So the amendments themselves are pretty simple in terms of going into the ordinance. Let's get to the top here. So as our memo talks about, we're looking at 3 different components. And 2 of those 3 that the UDO touch are covered here. So first one is really talking about security for the attendees, for the people that are working the event. And it starts with the incident action plan. So when we looked at what that plan would be, it's really just a communication between the sheriff's office, the local fire district, and then that's coordinated by EMA. So EMA would then add some of their flavor in terms of communication, anything that people needs, water and all that sort of stuff, making sure that lighting would be another component of that. So, but to trigger that, the ordinance initially had it at 2,500 people. We threw it at what would be the recommended floor. So we wouldn't really recommend anything lower than this. We put it at 250 to kind of throw it out for discussion. And as we looked at it, the sheriff's office, their website right now has 500 for security requirements, a party of 500 or more. However, it also adds some ambiguous language that says, or as needed. They will always add it for rodeos. So this doesn't trigger it for them. 250 people is a large event. You're gonna have 2 or 3 per car. So the fire district looks at it as a lot. There's a lot of cars, there's a lot of parking, there's a lot of opportunity for incident. So they're in favor of it. And then adding in EMA, it is an added workload. 2,500 people, we haven't had those since the Spartan races, so they haven't had many of the IAPs. So we're talking about maybe a dozen, maybe or so incident action plans a year that would be added to their workload. So just to kind of give you that full breadth of where that number came from.
I don't see it on here, Adam.
Okay, so that would be, like I said, it's very small in terms of the ordinance revisions. It would be on page 3, item 16. So a lot of the other revisions that you'll
Okay,
see on here.
2,500 to 250.
Yes, yeah, a lot of the other revisions are just cleaned up language. So I don't want to misrepresent that they're not important, but they're just language that kind of fit the vernacular of how it's proposed.
So these wedding venues, are they conditional use permits? Or?
They are, yeah, they are. So if you have a private wedding, it's just family and friends, they wouldn't fall into this. But if you're hosting weddings, you're renting out your barn for a wedding for people that you don't know, have no relation to besides the money, then this would trigger them. So and that was the discussion that we had, was, make sure you're aware of that. So if it was to tick up, maybe that would be a reason to do so.
So if there was a wedding and there's 2 or 3 of them in my district at least, and there was more than 250 people there, they'd have to have an incident action plan? Is it?
if it was not at a spot that has a conditional use and they're running a venue, they're pulling a temporary use for these, that would trigger it.
For the temporary, but the ones that have a conditional use would be okay, the ones that have them
Yep.
all the time, they're
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, because they are a commercial outfit. They're a commercial building, they're set up.
Okay,
My,
go ahead, John.
my only concern would be, are we hurting an innocent venue? You know, I just think about the Dole Farmers Market or, that,
Sure. Sure.
I mean, is there a victim in line here that, I mean, I understand it for some of these that serve alcohol and they're long all-day events that end up getting disorderly, just in the sport itself, because it just gets going crazy, right? But, a craft sale, do we need, that kind of, is there a victim here, Adam?
I think if you, at 2,500, no.
Correct.
So, and that's, I guess, why I presented in terms of this would be the floor. And I'll, perfectly frank, we talked about this, kind of that same piece. And do you go up to 300? Do you go up to 500? Some of our events are listed at 400 to 500 people. Some are 300, and that number kind of gets jockeyed around to dodge some of this.
What I was thinking was something like, and I don't know how to do it, but I mean, do we differentiate one that's, just a craft sale or a club versus one that's, a sporting or one that incites a lot of excitement, like,
That's fair.
If
Yeah.
I could add, the Woodstock Square is a site venue.
although
They
it's in
are-
the city, not the county, but if it were in the county,
Yeah.
right?
you are required to have a safety plan. And you are required to have an officer there. You pay for that. That's everybody. So they are blind sight to what the event is. It's just merely if you are using the Woodstock Square and you're gonna have this event and use the gazebo and you want to do that, then, and they might, if you say, look, I'm having 30 people, they might suspend it. But it's there. It's because we've done a couple events there. And I'm like, why do I need to pay for a police officer? And their response is.
Okay,
"Because
a
that's-"
police officer is okay, right?
Yeah, but if you have to,
sometimes,
based on the event, you have to have a safety plan. And so I think having a safety plan for, I don't know about private property, but, if it's a public event, then, I mean, if I had a family party, I could easily have 200 people at my house.
We should have police at that party.
But I think it would be
See where I'm getting
inappropriate.
at though,
I
Larry?
can see where you're getting at, but I think it'd be inappropriate, probably legally challenged. I'm not the attorney in the room, but to say because you're doing this and not that, you follow this rule and not that rule.
Right.
Good, Mr. Cuddebaugh, if you don't mind.
I would think you could probably define it differently depending on the event. You use the Dole Farmers Market. A farmer's market doesn't have a single event that everybody's coming to watch. It's
Right,
people
right,
coming in and out
yes,
all day.
yes,
I don't-
perfect example, Joe.
I think if you had, I think it's a very different event than that. On the other hand, this developed because of the somewhat near catastrophes we've had with rodeos.
Dubious in nature.
But those are all coming, everybody's coming to be at that event when the rodeo starts. So you're gonna put those, if you had bleachers, they're all gonna be in the bleachers at the same time. So I think if you wanted to get creative, you could probably do something like that.
Somehow
But-
define it.
But I'm not opposed to saying, look, if you got more than 250 people coming to your property, we just want to make certain that we have, safety in place so that if something does happen, we can get police and fire and emergency help out of the situation.
My only concern is 5 years when we're all gone,
Yeah.
this is misinterpreted.
Well, we'll be gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
How do we come up with the number 250?
So 250 is, when we see these, the wedding venues are at, we have one wedding venue that's listed at about 300 people. And everything else is lower than that. That 250 mark is kind of that very high end of the wedding. But we just don't see it. So everything above that.
Because they could do 4 a year, temporary events. They could do 4 weddings a year, someone could. And so you did answer my question there, that the 250 seems to be the high end. And the rodeos blow that away.
Typically.
Yeah.
Typically, yeah.
I don't want to obstruct what we're doing here because this is very, very necessary. I'm just concerned that there are some venues that we might be putting, thousands of dollars disadvantage on.
They could come in and get a conditional use permit. If they're gonna have more than 4 a year, they can come in and ask for it and explain why their neighbors should all get to listen to the band until 2 a.m.
I personally think the number's a little low, so I'm gonna throw that out there.
And that's what my question was, how we got to
Yeah,
250.
I mean, we don't wanna be nitpicking at that wedding that has 241 people or 251 people or whatever, and it seems that number could move to 500 very easy and still we'd have control over the situation, in my opinion.
I would agree with you on that.
I would too.
So that's, anything else? We'll stick with the number for a second. I got a couple other questions, but that seems to be,
Well, can we move it to 500?
yeah, this is, we're just giving them direction. They're gonna bring it back.
Yeah, and so how, this is a little bit of a different petition, or I should say action on this, is you guys will end up being the petitioner. And so we're getting direction to then file this petition. It'll go in front of the ZBA. The ZBA will review it in terms of the UDO, and then it'll come back and go through the full board cycle. So this is exactly what we're looking for, is throwing out some of these spots that we need your input on. So we're excited. And there's a reason why we started with this one.
Well, and I also see that on page 4, you have different requirements for different kinds of events. So,
Yep.
Something that has alcohol, that's open to the general public, has more restrictions on it or more requirements than the family reunion, which, so you've made some of those provisions on lighting, noise, and I think some of this is also designed to protect the life of neighbors and residents in the areas who, we've heard from some of them who have to bear the noise and the traffic, and so, yeah, I'm not.
Okay, I can come up with an example because it came to me. But some privately owned public venues, like Galt Airport or Dacey Airport, they might have a pancake breakfast to help fund, to keep the airport alive. So their margins are tight. And maybe they only have a gross of 4,000 or 5,000 for that annual budget, right? Gross sales. And, we're gonna cost them money, and it's an incident that, maybe they'll have 400 or 500 people there, but it'll be spread between 7 in the morning until noon, maybe only 100 are there at once. I mean, how do we not step on those people? The innocent ones.
That's burdensome. What would we be requiring of them?
So
Would
on
be a
this,
burden to that kind
Well, right, we would have to have law enforcement, as in 16, if you read it, right? The execute plan shall include law enforcement, fire, public health, and public works transportation roles. I mean, is there a way we could, or maybe the hours, because you have morning events? I just don't know. And maybe this is something, we're not gonna solve today, but maybe we could address it for the next month's meeting.
How about if there would be some language that would say more than five, if we do move it to 500, which I brought up, would you have more than 500 on site at any particular time?
Right?
Is that,
Did you say at any one time?
yeah, on site at any one time?
And that's one of the modifications that you can easily make, is that if there's anticipated attendance versus occupancy or attendance at any given time greater than 250, that is something. It'd be difficult to regulate. You could I don't want to say everyone could just say, oh, it's going to be spread out. Because that is one of the things that we'll hear from rodeos specifically, which I don't want to deny that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Is that but people will come and go. We'll see a lot of turnover in those. So it's 1,500 people, but at any given time it's 500 people. They're kind of rotating throughout.
Yeah. And like Joe said, everybody's coming to watch that show and watch that and get all pumped up. I get that, but I just hate 5-10 years from now, what we complain about, unfunded mandates, when Springfield does it to us, and now are we doing something that we misinterpret 10 years from now.
Can we, I don't know.
Just a second, Carolyn, go ahead.
Well, to that, and I agree with you, because I think it's important that we be sure that what we do makes sense and we're not placing a burden. But I mean, at that point, part of this is going to be putting our reasonable best effort out there. And, if it doesn't meet what we thought it was going to meet in 5 years, or maybe even next year, we sit back down here and we say, okay, well, that particular part of the provision didn't work as well as we thought. Maybe we need to change it. And nothing stops us from changing it again. So I don't, I get what you're saying, but we, because we're the ones doing it, we have the ability to change it later if we need to. Right?
Well, my other question is, and I don't know if we're allowed to I don't know if you can do this, but can staff have discretion to waive something? And using the Galt Airport as an example, an event from 9 to noon with fluctuating, can you say, we waive the security piece? I don't know whether you can do that.
We wouldn't be able to waive the security piece.
Potentially they would now, because
It would be
what
from
this
the
does is
sheriff,
just
right?
triggers that extra look at the incident plan. So that would be, maybe the sheriff would say, I don't think there's any need for security out there. And he would have the discretion to do that.
I like that.
And that's an item that's already installed.
Is there verbiage in
process.
that at discretion of the sheriff, or?
It just says repeatedly that it is the review of the sheriff or the approval of the sheriff.
Nothing like if.
It's in item 9 or 8. It's in the existing ordinance that'll talk about that.
Yeah.
And then the sheriffs, when they look at the private security or the off-duty security detail, that's one of the things that they'll look at, and they gauge that. And for some of the events, they may just throw 2, and the minimum would be 2.
Yeah.
And other ones, they may throw 12.
If there is verbiage in there like that, because I do trust the sheriff, they don't want to waste their time on an unnecessary event, right?
And they know more about it than I do.
Yeah,
So-
and me too, yeah, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
And I'm thinking about, beyond Stables, over on 176, they're growing and growing. They're holding multiple events there. And I would think if it's of course, I know it's 5 o'clock somewhere everywhere, but still at, 8 in the morning, you're less likely to have a rowdy, I don't know. But I would prefer, I think it would be helpful to allow someone to have the discretion to waive that based on what the event is.
Joe?
Well, when I look at this, this says you're gonna have a plan. It doesn't say what the plan is. And that's where I think you do have to rely on the sheriff and the fire departments and the emergency management agency to say, I know the difference between a pancake breakfast and a rodeo.
Right,
And
I respect that, Joe, that's a good point.
So I don't have a problem with us saying, bring us a plan, and yeah, the first year there may be a bunch of new plans written, but by year 2, we're gonna have a pretty good idea of, hey, does this make any impact? Or is this really solving a problem? And I'm okay with the fact that that we trust our departments to make those decisions. I don't want to tell the sheriff how to do his job, but
Do you suggest we spell that out, Joe, or do
I
you think it
think
is
it's
spelled
here. I
out?
think paragraph 8 already has it. And I think even paragraph 16 just talks about when you're going to look at it. So the 250 might be too small, but it's just saying we're going to look at it. It doesn't say you're going to have 12 police officers there. It just says you got to
You
bring
don't
in
think that it
some.
should say a security plan if deemed necessary by the sheriff?
I don't think that hurts anything, but number 8, is this a security plan acceptable to the McHenry County Sheriff?
Because to me, it almost seems like it's implied that he's got to have a,
Well, but acceptable may be, I mean, if you only had 250 people coming to the town square, and they were gonna spread it out over 8 hours, you're probably not doing anything.
right.
So but I do think it's important that we have some, they're just using 250 as a trigger. If you wanna make 500 a trigger, that's okay too, but there's a trigger someplace. It probably ought to be less than 2,500. That's really the, how we get to it. But
Well, that
anyway.
maybe yeah, thank you. That's kind of an interesting point, because if they can say, if it's only just triggering it at 250, maybe they don't, the type of plan will depend on, maybe it's a more restrictive plan at 250 for a rodeo, but for a wedding, it's, well, whatever. It's, they're not anticipating as much, and it's a much more moderate plan.
I don't have any problem with that language. I think paragraph 8 covers it, that the sheriff has discretion.
But it doesn't say that. That's the only thing that I keep hanging my head on, Larry.
Acceptable to the county sheriff.
Because
Yeah, but if deemed necessary, right here, to me, it implies that it still has to have one.
Got to have a plan.
Mhm.
But the plan,
If the plan is a Boy Scout Troop 101, that's the plan, not necessarily the full sheriff's office. So it's got to have a plan, but it's at his discretion.
Man's got to have a plan. I appreciate it.
But what the plan looks like is dependent upon what they think the conditions require. So the plan
Yeah.
itself is not going to necessarily be a restrictive plan. It can be anything.
Okay, then never mind. I still think it should say if deemed necessary by the sheriff or.
well, I think the sheriff has had a real-time experience this summer about security for these venues. And so I would, if they can't provide the kind of security the sheriff says they need to have, then they can't happen. To me, that's like step 1. And I agree, acceptable is, to me, the same as you're saying. To me, it's just a different word. He has to approve the safety plan, or it can't go forward, correct?
That's my point. You just said that he has to approve the safety plan, necessary or not.
Then, are we talking about wordsmithing here? Is that what we're talking about?
I think I am.
The language is fine with me, I guess. Jim, do you want
On that subject and not on that subject, the violations for non-compliance, like you had a violation, you canceled one, they had it anyway, one of those. Are we strong enough wording on that 7, and is that really enforceable for us? I'm talking about section 7 where you say violations not compliance.
Yeah, very good.
You got 1 year that they would possibly be. Is there anything where it would trigger where they would have to put required to do a conditional use at some point to actually hold an event on that property, possibly in the future if they kept, after a certain number of violations, if they keep doing it? What's our?
They have to go to court if they keep doing it. It's just gonna end up in court. There's just no way around it.
Can we force them to go to a conditional use at that point though? Or
Well,
does it gotta go?
in court, I assume that they're gonna ask for an injunction to stop them from doing it.
Page 2. On page 2.
Am I correct in remembering that the last rodeo was not approved and they held it anyway? Am I?
There were 2 rodeos that were applied for, and actually the sheriff's office could not provide the necessary security for both of them. They're both on the same weekend. And those temporary use permits were revoked.
And so now are they not allowed to hold, what's the consequence for that?
So they did go through with those events, And with one of those sites, it would have been their third and their final anyway. So, and then the other one, it would have been their second. So what we informed them of is that they're done for the year. You know, is that the language in there talks about a reduction in the number of allowed temporary uses. So we exercise that portion. However, just kind of meeting in the middle and kind of seeing this through in terms of where it would go. And we didn't push for the one-year moratorium, just the way in the timing of the revocation.
Carolyn, do you have something?
Yeah, so we did talk about that, and I mean, it doesn't, I mean, some of these properties only hold it once a year, right?
In terms of the rodeos,
They usually do 3.
they
Common
typically will
business.
do the 3. I think we've had, in our, I'm trying to refresh, we've had over 4 locations. I'm sorry, I'm throwing this quickly. Of the ones that we've issued this year, they've been at 4 locations. I think we've got about a dozen, 9 events in total. And then 7 locations since 2021. So when we talk about the IAPs, it may be a little bit of a change up from the beginning, but they will become, if you will, routine. Those folks that have been applying for these since 2018 or so, we see a lot of those same site plans back. And we understand what they're applying for.
Because I think if you have a violation like that, and you told them that they don't have the plan in place or whatever, and they go ahead with it anyway, and we're only saying, okay, well, 1 year from now, we're gonna, it's like a slap on your hand, but in a year you can start up again. I mean, they could just start to rotate these wherever they want them to be. I don't know if 1 year is enough of a penalty when it's an outright blatant violation of something we have set up for the safety of people and animals at an event that can, that draws a lot of people. I mean, I don't think that's strong enough.
I have a thought, Julie, a personal guarantee, right? Or are they personally guaranteeing it? Because, I mean, if they're putting.
Personally guaranteed it anyway, whether they want to or not.
I
They've
mean,
already got.
you can get pretty nasty on an individual if he's going for it and they're try it again.
But if,
Go ahead, Jim.
but if they continued exactly what you're saying, wouldn't the response of the board at some point just to ban rodeos of this type for the county? Wouldn't that be the response that they would trigger at some point if you had such a conflict with these type of rodeos? And of course, you've got the fairgrounds, you got other ones that have rodeos, but those are sanctioned rodeos. So the question would be, you'd have to determine that, but wouldn't that be the answer?
So the ones, they're sanctioned by.
And I'm not saying I'm for banning
Yeah,
these
no, I know.
rodeos.
Jim, I think that might be an answer down the road somewhere, but I'm
Right,
not sure.
that's what I'm
not sure it's
I know what
helping.
you're saying.
I'm not sure it's helping our discussion today, right now.
No, but I think that kind of adds to what I was getting at, I think, is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
that answers her question about it.
So is everybody else good with the way that this reads? Because I know that we were talked about this and that we haven't really changed it at all when we first came up about it.
Which part?
The 1 year, the 1 year.
The 1 year, in terms of the violations, the violations as prescribed in the UDO, we recognize the same thing you're talking about. And I'll say the action that Joe described with the injunction, we've exercised that in the past as well when it's something where it just needs to have a stop to it. We've had that, the best example was a wedding venue that didn't have septic and had hazardous water supplies. And that was swift by the state's attorney's office. That was going back about 6 years. They didn't, I don't even know if we did a UDO violation on that. In terms of this, OV court, I should say. I think it went right to Chancery.
Public health,
There it is.
yeah, because Chancery.
Chancery, yeah.
Well, this also says, I mean, you mentioned
Well, I can
it
think of
earlier.
Camille's name.
And you mentioned it earlier, is that you may result, a violation in any terms of the use could be a reduction in the number, which could mean they violated maybe at the beginning of the year. It's like, okay, you're done for the year. I mean, not only a reduction, but you're not having any more for the year. Because that's what the way this reads, you could do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and that's exactly what we based that revocation on, was one specific item in the code.
And then I have one other question, I'm sorry.
Sure.
All right, going back down to and radios. We talk about an Illinois licensed vet on site. Emergency medical services be provided on site by the local fire district or private service. So what would qualify for a private service and who would we allow to come in?
So there's private ambulance services for some of the districts that are not full-time or not, or have reduced. This recommendation came from the fire districts themselves.
Okay.
And maybe we look at that language to verify, to pair with, let's say, the one Illinois licensed doctor or veterinary. Yeah, maybe there's something that's a little bit more official on that.
Yes, like what would qualify for a private service,
Yeah, right.
I think would be appropriate.
Are you reading it now?
I'm looking at
Yeah.
something B.
So, yeah, and I'll introduce those couple items that we have added. These are standards. Item 8, rodeos are subject to the following additional standards. An Illinois licensed veterinary medicine, doctor of veterinary medicine be present for the duration of the event and available to treat and evaluate animal athletes' ability to participate in the event. So treat and evaluate if something does come up. They're there. They're putting their practice to use. The EMS services, we'll look at that private portion. And then lighting shall be provided along ingress and egress aisles, including parking areas and traffic control locations. Ambient light levels shall be no less than 5-foot candles. That's a very standard ADA practice for just wayfinding. Ambient light, if you have a light at the top of a dormer or something like that, it will give you 5-foot candles. Basically, you can see a pothole in front of you, is where about that is. So that's something that fire districts, EMS, they'll be pretty comfortable with that lighting level and make those adjustments there. It gives them the authority to do so. At least that's the intent.
So on another note, I don't want to get off the subject if you got more on that.
No.
I did have a question on that.
Okay, go ahead, Graham.
So on 8, when we talk about, because one of the things that brought us here a little bit too is the treatment of the animals. And so now A talks about having a licensed vet. They're there for the duration. They treat and evaluate their ability to participate. Do we need language in there that would actually say what happens if they violate or somehow are treating the animal in the way that triggered this whole thing to begin with? Does it end the event? What happens? We don't have, there's no, I mean, it puts somebody on site, but it doesn't really add the teeth you need if they're violating.
Yeah, do they have the authority to shut the event down?
If they're,
Send everybody home, call the police? I mean, right. Having a standard without an impact if you break it is what?
So as we understand it, and kind of speaking off the cuff here, just through the other conversations that we've had with the sheriff's office, with and with animal control, is in the event that there's mistreatment of the animals, intervention is possible by anybody, right? Whether it's the sheriffs, they're the ones that would actually cite that. But notice, if it's a participant, if it's an attendee, if it's one of the other deputies, noticing them. We had one incident, one of the last rodeos, where private security notified the sheriff's deputy of such behavior, and they intervened, and that guy was removed from the event. That's an ideal situation. But we've also seen it go the other way, where we're shutting down the event in the wake of an incident, not similar to animal abuse or anything like that. Shutting down the event was considered but wasn't executed because it probably would have been more dangerous for everybody than it would have been to just carry out the necessary services that they were performing at that point. So it's their discretion. The sheriff's deputy has the authority to call in and shut the event down based on whatever they need. Having on-site medical, having more uniforms out there, there's some confidence that there's more eyes. But that's a hard.
That's just not.
Did I dance out of that answer enough?
well, but I think what you're saying that, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I think what you're saying then is if you do have somebody with their eyes on the animal, they have the ability to call the sheriff and say, hey, this is out of hand. And then he comes in, or a deputy comes in and helps make the determination about what steps are needed next.
Jen, did you have something you want to, I didn't catch that.
I didn't. I don't know if this is really overdoing it. But I mean, you know, because it doesn't say the standard, I hate to put that on the veterinarian or the officer, you know, because they're squeamish or whatever, and rodeos are tough, you know, barrel racing's pretty hard on a, you know, but it's not mean, it's just, you know, it's just racing a horse. But is there any way of that, like, our, you know, our animal control, that we could provide a staff for a fee that would determine what's cruel and what's not? I mean, if we're not gonna put a standard of the American Rodeo Association in there, right? Because I'm sure they have them, you know, what's cruelty and what's not. Do we have a department in the animal control that could determine that? Obviously for a fee, you know,
John? Just a second. Joe's been good. I'm looking to get in on this.
The situation, remember, we're dealing with the zoning ordinance. There's still all this criminal statutes out there about cruelty to animals, all those other things. And they still exist. They're not going to be part of our zoning ordinance. But if the vet sees somebody and says, you know, this is cruel, he can call the sheriff. They can charge that owner or you know, those people on the spot with that. So there are other things besides shutting down.
we don't need to spell out.
Yeah, we don't, we're not,
I'm good with that.
those criminal standards still exist. We're not getting rid of the anti-cruelty statutes for animals. We're just saying when we have an event, you know, we're bringing the medical, the veterinarians on site. He's going to be able to tell you in 2 seconds whether or not this animal, it should be running or should be doing whatever. And if they won't take his word for it, they're going to be subject to the possibility of ending up in criminal courts. I mean, I don't know about you, but I would shut down my event, don't put me in jail.
Yeah, I accept that. I mean, you know, because I hate to be too far reaching.
Yeah. Carl,
It's
did you have?
subjective, that's why you'd have to use,
But you've got, those statutes still exist.
that's what I mean, that's why you'd have to use your statutes and everything, so you get rid of the subjectivity of it.
Okay, Carl, did you have some?
Basically, Joe took the words out because I was gonna mention
Don't
the
forget.
vets
Yeah.
by license law have certain things that they gotta adhere to. The sheriff has certain laws and requirements to adhere to. So they got their marching orders.
In this case, less is more.
And the only thing, these are for-profit events to make money. I have no problem with that. And sometimes the only thing that they really understand, you think they haven't factored in, people who are gonna break the law factor in, how much can we afford to lose on this? If there's no real impact, like we will shut you down if you do this, you will pack up and go home if this happens, there's no incentive to follow the law, you know that. So I have no problem saying that if a vet sees animal abuse and harm, the sheriff, call them in and shut the event down. And you really only have to do that one time, right? You have to demonstrate that we have some muscle behind this ordinance. Other venue managers will fall in line until they figure out a different way to violate the ordinance. That might take them a couple of, come on, we all know there's no altruistic motive behind putting these events on. I have no problem with people making money. Do the right thing while you're making a profit off the event. And if you don't, then we will shut you down. But, and I know I'm a hardline person sometimes. And when you.
And that's fine, Lou, but I
Yeah.
don't know that we can, I guess the word.
Why? I don't know why we can't do
legislate
that.
to the sheriff how he's gonna enforce and do his enforcement or.
It goes right to Jimmy's point, you know, is what is the penalty?
Yeah, what's it?
Well, you've got a range of them. You can shut down an event, you can shut down future events, you can charge someone with the crime of animal cruelty, you can put them in jail. I mean, you know, one guy goes to jail because they decided to run an animal that shouldn't be run, and the vet says no. And that's going to spread around the circuit pretty quick.
The wheels of justice turn ever so slowly.
They do, and I'm not going to be able to stop an animal who's, injured on that moment, but I can, with what we have on the books today, I can make certain that that owner makes certain that it doesn't happen again, because he's gonna spend some time.
Well, I think the other thing it would do is it would weed out people who don't want to do the work of putting on a safe event for everybody involved, animals, humans, consumers, staff. Those people will go find someplace else that will let them do what they want to do.
I'm still confused as to whether we're gonna do it in this ordinance, in this approval or not, though. That's up to the ship, right? I mean, who's it up to?
You can't, you can put the ordinance out there, but other entities have to enforce it.
Right, so
There's any.
I'll add-
are we in the weeds here, or?
I'll add one piece to it. We've had the response in the past where, in the 2 months ago or so, where the sheriffs were notified of an animal cruelty complaint, and they isolated the incident. They called animal control on call, whoever was on call there. They came out, reviewed, and made a determination that it was not animal cruelty. So there's a process in place for that. Doesn't necessarily go as far as shutting the event down, but it isolates it and to that, and couple that with the person that was ejected from the event.
And your point of possibly trying to shut an event down because somebody doesn't like something, to try to shut you might create a riot on the whole deal. And handling it individually is the smartest thing to do.
Or the unforeseen consequences like we're always talking about. I mean, there could be a wedding venue where somebody needs to be removed. Do you shut the wedding down?
Right.
I mean,
So when it's the girl.
Everybody's got that drunk uncle. Not me.
But we're really not talking about the same thing. To me, rodeos are very different. They're a profit-making event. There are multiple layers of things there's alcohol served, and we've seen it. Alcohol served.
You've said nothing different than a wedding
Weddings are profit-making.
I was gonna say, they're not doing weddings for the fun of it.
Except that you are inviting members of the public to pay a fee to come to this event. So to me, it's a commercial event. It's there to raise money, to make a profit. To me, that's different than a wedding, right. To me, it's different.
These wedding venues are in the same business.
I understand.
You can call it a little different,
Sorry.
maybe, but.
You know what, I'm just gonna tell you, I played weddings for years and years and years. And yeah, there's always the few. Family members move in, they manage the drunk Uncle Harry who can't let go of the microphone. They take them to a corner, they feed them black coffee, and somebody takes them home. Or sometimes there's a fight, but it's not like a rodeo. To me, it's just very different.
So the language we have here that we're discussing, is there anything more specific that we want to change on this stuff? Or are we getting this down to where they can put something together and bring it back next month? Carolyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I think so, and I think what Lou's getting at is she'd like to see some language change there. But I also think that, when you make the point that if you put in something that if they have this violation, it's shut down, it becomes this it becomes this directive that it gets shut down, and the sheriff may make the determination that it's not going to be safe for anybody, because if something were to erupt, I mean, they can actually read the scene better than we can on paper. If there is the ability for the sheriff to make that determination that it was a serious violation, and they're not convinced that they will continue in, that their fear is that it's not just the one animal, that when they take this one animal out, that they'll repeat the process. It's up to them at that point to make the determination to shut it down. And if they have that ability to do that, and they're willing to do that, then I'm fine with the language, because I understand sometimes directives can have unintended consequences.
Is there like,
Misinterpretations.
So, but I think that that's what this does. So I'm assuming, and if it's up to the sheriff, then it's having an honest discussion with him about what he'd be willing to do. And so, but that's not what we're accounting for.
is it proper to put in violation of any of these ordinance may result in or up to the following? If you do this will be, if you do this, the sheriff, I mean, I don't know if you can do that. So that when
Oh, well,
people
the sheriff-
sign.
It's kind of like.
The sheriff wouldn't have any greater
No,
authority
no, I mean,
because
to
of
the
UDO.
consumer, like if you
Oh.
violate this ordinance, here's what will happen. You may be subject to,
We already do, yeah, you do that in that one section where you
Yeah, I
say. it
saw
could-
that.
You could, like, if you violate the permit, then you shut down for a year, whatever, but you could do that, we do that in the personnel manual all the time, up to and
Yes.
including in termination. I mean, for every little thing that they talk about, so you could
and maybe
say.
just on rodeos. I mean, I hate to single them out, but they have been the most difficult problem we've had this summer.
That does bring up a question for the
Just Carl,
chairman.
Carl had something, John, just saying.
When you stated that they have to have X amount of security for X amount of people, that's the security from regular law enforcement parked on their day off or volunteering for it, right?
Correct.
So their duty doesn't end when they walk out. They still know all the codes, all the rules, all the regulations. So if their eyes are seeing something that's going down illegally, I feel confident that they're gonna pick up the phone or radio and say, give me some help. We're doing X, Y, and Z for whatever the problem is. So we're good with I'm good with this because I trust what the sheriff's department's doing. I trust the medical, be it the vet or, on-site first responders to be the eyes to see what's going on. So to muddle it up, I don't see any reason to do it.
And if we're gonna err on this, I'd rather err on it not being so specific on some things. John, I'm sorry, Karen,
Yeah,
John
go
was
ahead.
asking a minute ago.
I agree with you on that full-heartedly, although, I mean, to your opinion or discretion, do we need to send this to law and governance for that? I mean, well, I don't know.
We did have a brief discussion with them on law and government. If you listen back to it, I was far less prepared than this meeting. Because I came there for one thing and ended up talking about this. But there was support in general in terms of what we were talking about in terms of areas of focus and some of the specifics. But we didn't have it nearly as detailed.
Did you want to go forward from here to the ZBA, or did you want to bring this back?
Up to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I feel
We're in no rush with the way the season is. I just assumed it would come back because I'm not sure we're
Whatever,
all.
I just didn't know what their plan was.
Yeah.
our modifications, the direction that we've got here is pretty straightforward. I mean, we've got, looking at the modification of 250 to 500, additional definition on the private service for the EMS. But really that's kind of it. There's some direction that we talked about with animal control being on site, but then I think they're still baked into this process outside of the UDO through the sheriff's authority. And then maybe some differentiation between rodeos, but then I heard that kind of go back and forth too a little bit.
Okay, Carolyn, you have?
I just wanted to follow back up on because sometimes we got a little bit away from it, just in terms of, do we want to, do we all feel like it would make sense to add something in that just is a blanket statement, and a violation of this, section or whatever, can result up to and including termination of the permit or revocation of the permit or the cancellation of the event. I mean, it potentially could cancel an event. Could be one situation where they really feel like they can do it safely, whatever. But I mean, it just gets it out there, to Lou's point, it just gets it out there that you do run the risk. If you violate this, we could end up pulling your permit or canceling your event. I mean, it does not say specifically why or how. Again, leaving it up to the discretion of the sheriff. But it's just like that personnel manual. It tells you every other line up to and including termination,
So if we did something like that.
And then just draw it up and see.
Then I forget when we did it about the building permits, we had something redlined right on the application because nobody running any of these events is going to read the UDO. I mean, so it'd have to be somehow redlined right on the application if that was the choice of the committee to do that. So they see it.
That's a
We
good
could do it. I mean, it would it would affect to get them thinking about it. So
Homeowners
I think
associations.
we could put that in there.
Homeowners associations.
One of the other questions that I do have written down would be, is there more penalty that you're seeking? The violation section has come up a few different times. You know, the cancellation on that event is one piece and component. The 1-year moratorium, is that something you would maintain? I don't, I'm throwing it out there just to kind of move on from that portion too. But I've heard a lot about it.
What about, is there any payment, you know, if they violate the permit, what about recapturing the cost of granting the permit, staff time for going through all the effort of getting the permit in the first place? I don't know if that's even worth it, I don't know how.
Yeah, that'd be, I'll say that would be difficult to track for some of them. Some fire districts and all that sort of stuff, when you're communicating, coordinating, have a little more involvement, others have less in terms of pulling us into it. And then having revisions to the site plan or whatever, maybe that would be something we would have to try to track.
Or even just pick a number, I mean, not
Yeah, right.
necessarily go back and try to, you know, figure out every minute or anything, but pick a number. That was just a thought.
Jim, did you have something?
You know, I go back to, this is all pretty much come up, we'll admit, because of the rodeos. In the past, this came up to the board because of the horse racing that was going on. And we continued to have violations and problems with them, and what did we do as a board? We eliminated horse racing, right?
Horse racing.
There's your answer in the end, if you continue to have these problems. I think the more we throw at this, it creates, you know, hey, we have problems with you guys all the time.
We make it from
We're
a
just gonna get
temporary
rid of it.
event to a conditional use. We would have to change.
Right. And the conditional use, you lock it onto the property in one place.
I think there's an incentive to make as much money as you want to make if you follow the ordinance. And if you don't, then you don't get to play here. I think that that's fair. I actually would even wonder, this is off there, but you know, if someone does something egregious, is there a database? Can we alert other counties that this is a bad actor and be aware that they violated? I mean, the price of doing business ethically has to be, it's easier to follow the rules so you can make your money than it is to break the rule. And then eventually we're just gonna make it very public that you're a bad actor. You probably can't do that. I mean, I don't know.
We don't need a slander suit.
Yeah, I'm not with you on that.
Put it on the post office.
So does anyone else have anything specific? Otherwise, I think we got pretty good directions.
Okay.
I have,
I'm cool with it.
I have one that I wanted to bring up is the dram shop. Do we get a license, signed copy of their dram shop insurance as part of the permit? We see it, we get it?
The Liquor Commission does. We get the general liability certificate. And I noticed in here that we were only asking that McHenry County be a named insured on fireworks. So I actually changed that to
Yeah, I saw
all
that.
temporary use
Yeah.
permits.
Okay. Yeah, we should be a name insurance on all of it. And then the beverage, alcohol, sellers and service certification, do we have anything on our stuff about that?
Kathy can probably answer these questions better than I can because she handles that portion of it.
A little bit, yeah. So we are working to revamp our ordinance right now as well with the state's attorney's office to put in some regulations on how many drinks can be served at a time and what kind of drinks can be served at a time.
As rarely as it is in Illinois, I can sit and have a beer and a shot in front of me, but I cannot have 2 beers. But I'm talking more about the server themselves. Do we guarantee that they're certified?
We do ask for all their Bassett licenses of those who are serving and selling or checking.
Okay, and any of these temporary permits?
Yes.
They got is that in our ordinance anywhere?
Yes.
This ordinance?
or ours.
It's in the liquor ordinance.
Not
Liquor.
in-
The
Yeah, it's-
ordinance? Okay, so that's part of the,
It's one of our requirements.
okay, when they come to the temporary liquor license, they get, show their dram shop, show the Bassett certs for everybody that's gonna be working it? Is that,
Yeah, and so our dram shop insurance is sometimes different than the one that Kim has, because theirs might list the person holding the event, and ours lists the insured as the liquor license holder.
okay,
And ours must state that they have liquor liability.
okay, liquor liability and the people serving it will be Bassett certified,
Correct.
kind of thing, okay. Anybody else on this one?
May I
Go
point
ahead.
out one other thing with this? There was some confusion. I was confused because in the text of the ordinance, it says that you can have one of these temporary entertainment events per year in the residential zoning districts. But then in the actual chart, when it got codified, it didn't include that. So I thought we haven't really had requests for that anyway. And the chances of creating a nuisance in a neighborhood seems to me it would be pretty great with these things. So the red line just eliminates that language about the one in the residential districts and then just solidifies the use chart.
What line are you on?
I don't see the red line. Where is that? It's under uses.
under the 16.
Zoning district uses.
I see. Yes, but I
Page
don't see
3.
any red line.
Is it
I
the,
just see T added to A2 and
It
I
says that it's when it's giving, so whatever this is, so go up from, it's the two
D2.
before,
Yeah, D2, it's split on the sheet, that's
Yeah.
right.
at the top of page 4, I guess it is?
Yeah,
the-
very top
the red
page
line
for
word of it, okay.
temporary entertainment events, limited to 3 events per calendar year with a minimum of 4 days between events, maximum duration of 30, in any district except for residential zoning districts, which are limited to 1.
oh, and then just, take that out. I'm sorry, yes. Yes, got it.
So,
Okay.
what is the point of taking it out? I mean, it hasn't been an issue.
no one has requested it, but say I live on the lake, in Wonder Lake, and I have a 1 acre lot, and I decide, hey, it'd be cool if I let somebody rent out my space and get married here, and they have 250 people there. It seems like to allow them in residential districts, even just one could create more of a problem.
Okay, I gotta reread this then, because to me, this says that you
That
can
didn't make
have
sense.
3 in any district except for residential districts.
Yes, so you
So-
can do it in any district except the residential zoning districts, which would be the E districts and the R
That
district.
wouldn't be
Okay.
a neighborhood block party, would it, Larry?
Wait,
So-
no,
You don't,
These would
they wouldn't
be,
get a temporary.
yeah, these
We
would
don't do
be,
them for
yeah, again, we'd look at that kind of as a private event. There's a graduation party or anything like that, which wouldn't be
Yeah.
regulated at all.
Okay, now I agree.
If you have an
That makes sense.
Oktoberfest
Yeah.
at your house.
so you
and
could
you're-
have, in that
selling
same,
tickets,
if
that
the house, you could have your son's
bet.
wedding there. That would be fine, that would be exempt.
Carolyn?
Okay, so I think that the reason the wording is the way it is because you were allowing one event in the residential, right, so you're just taking that out. The chart itself does not seem to allow it in the state either. You've got temporary use availability in A1.
The state is a residential district.
Okay, well, that's fine. What I'm getting at, okay.
I don't know. I don't know if I like that, eliminating them totally. If I have say a 8 acre estate, and I want to have a wedding for somebody who's not a family member, I should be able to host that wedding.
If you have less than 500 people, you don't even have to come and ask.
Right, well, that's true
That's the
too.
people amount. Yeah,
And if
that's
you're
true.
hosting for a friend or family, it's
Yeah,
fine.
so it's
It's
your
just, but
property.
if you advertise,
You're
hey,
running it
come and
for
have your
profit,
wedding
it's a
at
different
this
scenario.
venue.
Well, then you're commercial.
Yeah,
So it's a complete stranger and you're selling that service.
but it's only 3 a year, right?
Now it's zero if
No, I mean, on everything else,
For
it's 3 a year.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
I don't know why I thought it was 4, but,
Well, some other, like temporary sales are 4 a year,
okay, that's
different
right.
categories. And I think it's for up to 4 days. Each of your event periods is up to 4 days.
So
You
so I
know,
guess
4
back to
days only.
my original question on the estate or different things. If it's not required anyway, because then I'm okay, I guess. I rescind my objection.
Okay, Luke?
And as a private residence, would you even know about this ordinance? I mean, you wouldn't even know about it if you were just having a big event. You'd be like, I own this property, I have enough space, so I don't believe we should.
But if we move this to 500, what we are saying is, if you don't know about it, if you bring 500 people to your house,
Gosh, if you have 500 family members, that's cool.
Our friends.
Italians.
So, anyone else have any more on this?
let's go
All
on.
right, okay, I think you got,
Thank
you got your direction. The only last thing would be, does the committee want this to be rewritten and brought back here before it goes to the ZBA?
I think it's pretty clear.
I don't think so.
I don't need to see it again.
Okay, that's, committee
Sounds
says, go ahead and move forward once you do the changes.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
Great
thank you.
discussion,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Okay.
Short and sweet, Adam, that's all I like.
That's
Okay. Old business reports, ZBA stuff. Without the Henning's update, we're gonna move the Henning's update to the last one in that group of reports. Because we have a member that has a conflict. So, let's do the zoning applications first, please.
So you have 4 items going this month. 3 are on the consent agenda, 1 is on the regular agenda. The 3 on the consent agenda, the May property, it's an A1 to A2. It's a property on Walkup in Crystal Lake. What happened there is they had an 80-acre parcel. They parceled off an acre or so just because it's a flower farm where they're actually doing pure agriculture, and for whatever reason, they made the choice to parcel that off, which made the house on what was 80 acres an illegal lot. So in order to remedy that, they needed to rezone, so they rezoned to A2, or asking to rezone to A2. There was a vote of 5 to 1. The one person that voted against it was Mr. Kosen, and he was coming at it from kind of an intellectual planning standpoint because this property is adjacent to a municipality. It's also adjacent to higher intensity residential zoning. So he felt like in this case, it was more appropriate if it would have been an estate district. That was only one person on the zoning board that felt that way. Everybody else was comfortable with the A2. Azurite Solar is another solar farm. It is about 80 acres. It's on Bunker Hill Road and 23. And it had a 6 to 1 recommendation for. The one person was Mr. Jers, who has been voting no for all the solar farms that come through. The next one is Prodigy Properties. That is an event venue on Hebron Road. At the first date of hearing, there was some opposition. Some neighbors came in opposition. But the second date of hearing, there were no neighbors there that spoke against it. The applicants kind of solidified their plans in that first hearing. They were a little bit all over the place with their plans. They came and met with us in the meantime. They also hired an attorney and they honed in on their plan a little better, which I think made it more palatable. So it is quite a large event venue that they're building at that property. They currently have a farmstead there where they do education, and I think they have alpacas there that people come and visit and that sort of thing. And then the one that's on the regular agenda, which you will have to discuss, is the Nicolic property. So that one is on, I couldn't remember exactly, it's on South Rawson Bridge Road in Cary, near the river. And that one, they wanted to go from A1 to B3 because there was a violation there. He currently has RVs on the property that he's renting out. So in order to do any kind of business like that, storage, rental, anything like that, intensive, he has to have a B, commercial zoning district. The neighbors were very opposed, came out and were very opposed to the project. There just seemed to be a lot of history there with the property. I guess they have done some drive-through Christmas lighting events and things in the past that the neighbors have felt were burdensome and created nuisances there.
I misunderstood, but he had campers that he was renting out or storage?
RVs that he was renting out
For people to stay in?
for people to come and rent.
Oh.
If I want to take a trip and rent an RV,
Oh, I get you. Okay.
I would come there and rent the RV.
I was picturing that he's
Oh,
setting up a
sorry,
camp. He's setting
not a
up campground.
campground, no, not a campground, RV rental.
It's still a rental
Okay,
business.
so he's
then.
running a
But
business.
it's still a rental business that
And running a
requires a
rental
commercial
business,
zoning
okay.
district.
How many acres are there?
So,
I can read it, but.
2.2?
2.2?
2.2,
How
Okay.
close is this to Rawson Bridge?
close.
Is this like when you're going to Rawson Bridge, if you were going east, on the left-hand side, like the first corner?
It is,
Been a problem.
Adam will get you the map. Do we have the map?
Somehow you just changed Adobe.
It's
I'm good at
okay.
that.
I'll see it when it's when we see the full agenda. Okay.
It's not right on the river, but it's by Mr. Aldana. Do you know that one? Okay. It's by that.
I don't know the names, I just have been through there enough that there's one corner that's been a mess forever.
Well, you might have seen the large sign that talks, some kind of Christmas sign or something they put up, so. So anyway, that one is going with a recommendation of denial. It was a 7-0 vote for denial that the zoning board did not feel like this property was well-suited for a commercial zoning district.
Okay, great. Appreciate that update. All the committee members can read about those zoning things in their packets and give me a call if anybody has any questions, and I'll get together with Adam or whatever
You
we
don't
need
see
to do.
7-0 against very often.
That's pretty firm denial, yes. We're going to move past that to VRBOs.
So I just wanted to give an update respectfully on this as we, last month it was requested to come back this month with some amendments, but we're just not there yet. So I wanted to just bring that up. We're gonna still work through it and try to work on it in terms of bringing it forward. I think we're gonna try to bring it forward in a way that has a very similar discussion that we had for the other UDO amendments, just to kind of work through some of the areas where the board has options as we look at that. So, but again, we're tackling two main issues of these, I should say, two issues that we recognize when complaints come in. It's going to be traffic and parking and noise. And we're kind of hitting some of this is exactly what we discussed last month, where maybe it doesn't live in the UDO. There is a noise ordinance out there, and that's a whole nother avenue and a whole nother beast. And the sheriffs have the disturbing the peace and their own laws and regulations. So we're still trying to sift through that with admin and sheriff and state attorney's office.
We'll go, John.
I thought we just let this thing go. We felt this wasn't necessary to even follow through on it. Am I wrong? I mean, I thought.
I think there was some discussion there, a couple of things we could fine tune on that and get better. So not that any decision was made, but they're bringing some options back to us.
Yeah.
So
We
we'll look at
wouldn't be
that.
offended if that's the conclusion either. I mean,
I thought that's where we left it. I didn't think we had a major problem here.
I don't know
You
if it's
said
a
you had
major
total
problem,
of
but-
3 complaints or something this year.
We have, I've had a request from another board member that we would look into it and see if there's something we could do to fine tune it, or maybe not in the end,
Yeah.
you know? But I think we ought to have them research it to a little bit further and
Okay.
and bring it back to us, and ultimately what the decision will be. Whether anything moves forward or not, I guess it would be up to the committee.
Are we talking about like Airbnbs and?
Yes.
Yeah, and so they are coming under scrutiny. There is some discussion about whether or not they remove affordable housing options from the market. And so, you know, there's some pressure. So I think, you know, looking at it, I mean, if it's working, we don't have to do anything.
No, we'll let them review it and bring it back.
Yeah.
That's what I was asked to do for some other members. And yeah, Airbnb and vacation rental by owners are interchangeable really,
Yeah.
and I think Airbnb bought vacation rental by owner by at this point, so. Okay, sounds good if you bring that back when you get it ready. And we're gonna flip this a little bit, the last two, because you would do the 2050 comprehensive plan now and do the Henning one at the end, so that Mr. Godemuller can excuse himself at the end of the meeting, and he'd still be here for the 2050 plan.
well, 2050 comp plan is rolling ahead. I've got 2 experts that probably know more than I could drum up.
Three.
In the room, 3. Oh, Mary's there too, sorry. I'm behind Scott. So, I will offer input from the 3 of you.
I think Mary should-
In terms of that
If you
update,
wanna
but
come up and.
it's
and
been
speak,
great.
Or if you don't, that's fine, but feel free to come to the table if you do.
I made it last time, I missed the one before, so I think Mary is the best person to bring us up to speed. Oh, you're gonna be, well, I could, you know what, I can talk about the last meeting, but I can't talk about the meeting before, because I was not there, where we got to the land use maps. But I mean, this last meeting went very well in terms of, we had, former State Representative Bill Tryon come in and speak about solar farms, that whole industry, how they work.
Mary, to be on the microphone, I'm sorry, you gotta get you right up here in front. So that our public can hear you. Thank you.
And then we got talking with the, so yeah, it was a very good presentation. If you want any more information on solar, that was good to go back to that particular meeting. It's the 4th Thursdays of the month. And then we got into more revisions on the actual plan itself. And then the month before.
Yeah, as I said, right on it again.
They're up in the ceiling.
You're on.
Okay. It's hard to get used to this being so open. Now, we've always had, now that we have monthly meetings, we have had presentations. And where we need to go with those presentations is more for an education for everybody or anybody who wants to hear about them. But we wanted to make sure that all of our commissioners are as well versed as they can be to make decisions on where we want to go, how fast, how far. It was nice having Mike Tryon there who could give us the legislative end and give us some ideas of what we're actually working with capacity and whether or not it can be done and how long it takes to be done. So it's a good presentation to look at from our last meeting. The meeting before we had the HLA was there.
Correct, I thought it was one
And
of the
made-
land use map, right? Where you got
we
more.
went through the land use maps and going forward with that, we said, okay, now let's do this one, see where we go. Now we're going to have in October meetings with municipalities and the townships that are going to start here, and people can call in virtually on the 25th and 26th of October. One is in the morning and the other one's in the afternoon, so that we can get that going, because then we have our meeting on the 26th. We continue to talk about water because we didn't finish that on our historic preservations and how that all works together and what they can get together with those meetings, and then we'll have the next meeting would be in November for, is that going to be our final? No, it's not quite. We still have a couple to go yet. Okay.
They should have the draft plan by the end of the year, and it should be coming to you guys in February, I'm gonna guess, February, March. So what Mary's talking about with the meeting at the end of this month is the Halcyon Levine has developed a draft future land use map. So the future land use map is the crux of the whole thing. It shows how we're gonna develop.
What meeting will that be at?
So that is October 25th and 26th, and we'll get you guys that invite. We had Shaylin Daigle sent it out for us, and we're inviting all of the municipal officials and all of the township officials to come in, be the first ones to have a look at that map and give us their opinions about the plan for going forward. So that is a big part of it. So we're more than halfway done. We're getting there.
So can we summarize that we're on schedule and things are going well?
Yes.
We'll have it done by 2050.
No. We anticipate.
And it'll be correct.
We anticipate, and I'm probably going to be talking to them more about this in the next couple of days, but we have to start pushing this to make sure that we are done by March, if we can. If there's any way we can, it's what's advantageous for us to make sure we all have the same board here to be talking about these things and getting ready for them and to vote on them. So you never know what's going to be happening. You don't, whoever's here, you don't want to have somebody who has to hit the road running to do something with this. So, or to get people who have to be involved talking about what they want to be involved with, and then they get sidelined with something that they don't have yet.
Okay, very good. Thanks for coming in, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Mr. Gardemauer, and I understand we'll see you another day.
All right, so we're on Henning.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this is the one that Mr. Gardemauer has to excuse himself from. That's why we held it to the end. So go ahead, Adam.
Sure. So we have one project that we're just going through the final paperwork. The work's done. It's been accepted verbally. We've offered that to one of the contractors, and that was the stormwater management system repairs. So they had to do some ditching, some seeding, some new culvert. It all went very well, and that one's closing. The other one's not. The waste treatment system, what we're running into are some issues with the existing conditions. So we've got some old controllers for these blower fans that we had everything in, and we kept rolling a motherboard. So we've gone through two motherboards with two circuits, and now we've figured out that it's not necessarily that circuit, that board that needs to be replaced. It's the variable frequency driver that controls when that fan goes on, how long it goes on, a little bit more than just the actual chip. And so where that went was a change order, which have the funds to do it in that letter of credit. What gets muddy about it is that if you recall, a couple months ago, we went forward with bid package B, which is the landscaping plan. And we've had to put them on pause and talk about reductions in their scope of work and in their contract in order to ensure that this equipment works. So we're working through it. I had a meeting out there yesterday afternoon to walk the site with their HOA president, with our construction manager. We've got everything else pretty well lined up, and really where we're at is we're just trying to kind of close this and turn it over to them and recognize that, hey, we've got a few of these issues that are just going to be inherent issues that they have, whether it's aging infrastructure or how that might be. But so this is a little bit beyond what we had initially specified in our scope of work, but just because of the age of the equipment at 16 years old, the controllers just couldn't handle the new blowers, essentially.
So the HOA and the community's understanding of what's happening and why, and They're working with us. It's not like they're asking for more or different. We just gotta change, I would say, change the specifics of the contract to go with something that's more important.
Yes, yeah, they are on board with that. They recognize that failure to complete this stuff properly will result in overflow of their toilets, to put it cleanly. So it's been a learning experience for their HOA. Their HOA president, Jeff Schrammick, has been outstanding in this all of a sudden new career that he's got. But they also recognize, you mentioned, are they asking for more every time we talk to them? But they also recognize that what we're doing is what we can do, and there's really not much more that we will.
The landscaping that's not gonna get done now, is that a requirement by our ordinance somewhere, or is it part of the HOA requirements?
So it's mostly, they have a couple different options to comply with our ordinance. However, it's not something that we'll come down and hammer them on. It's never going to fully comply. Nature's taken over in some of their areas. So what we're really focusing on are those open areas that are accessible and abut property owners that, they have to fight off these creeping weeds. It's like that new commercial that's out, the weeds everywhere taking over on the second floor. So there's some infrastructure impacts to those, to drainage ways and whatnot. Those are really the focus areas for this landscape project. And that's where we're gonna keep those funds where we can. And then some of the open space we're replacing these weeds with some of the approved native mixes just are not the priority.
So in the long run, it's been quite a process, but it sounds like we've made some good advances there, some accomplishments, and
Yes, yeah, I mean, just going into their operations building, it looks brand new. I mean, it's got everything's pretty well polished up. They've cleaned up a lot of the equipment. Baxter Woodman has been phenomenal in terms of their expertise on this. Like I said, it looks like a new mechanical room, which some people may not appreciate, but boy, they're nice.
yeah, okay. And to be specific again, that's all been done with the monies from the insurance bond.
The letter of credit, the letter of credit that we pulled. So new roads all the way to these new drivers that we're putting in.
Not spending county monies.
Nope.
What I wanted to get on record.
Yeah, confirmed.
Okay, Jim?
I just wanted to ask how much of that money is left, that bond?
So we have, to paint a picture, when we're down into the dozens, I think it's like 12 or $18 are left on the table in contract. So we had, with the first change order that was modified, we had to go back through and work that out to get $11,000 or so back. And so I think right now we have it's like $12.43 that's allocated. And if it's just the landscaping, that's perfect. There's no existing conditions or unforeseen conditions that we're gonna run into like a VFD.
Health or habitability is not an issue.
Pardon me?
Health or habitability, toilets will flush.
Yeah, at this point, right?
So when that funds runs out, you're basically done with this?
Then we're done. Yeah, if there's anything left over, we're gonna end up buying whatever's on the shelf at Menards to get them a little bag of grass seed or something like that. Here, it's all spent. Yeah, and then it'll be done.
Okay, we've done a great job with that. That's to work with the homeowners association and help them out and get things organized. That was great. Okay, anything else on that, Ben?
That's it.
Okay, move to future topics. If anybody else has anything that they'd like to put on the agenda for the next month or two or looked into? Not seeing anything, no executive session. I'm looking for a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion.
Moved by Carl, seconded by Lou.
Sounds good. I saw her hand raised.
All those in